Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell are the best backcourt duo in the WNBA.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Clea Butler, the sideline reporter for the Chicago Sky, and joined with me is my co-host, Sophia Jones, the radio analyst for the Portland Fire. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this MLB season. All right, getting into a preview of what we are chatting about today. Some games that we will be talking about. Who's a good one today? We have the Tempo going up against the Wings. That's going to be my favorite one of the day. We have Sophia's Portland Fire going up against the Minnesota Lynx. Some fun ones today. We also are going to discuss what the Aces can do to possibly repeat. We talked about the Minnesota Lynx yesterday and how we feel like they are the real front runners of winning the WNBA title. However, obviously we know this is an Aces group that figures it out when they need to. So what that could possibly look like for this team as we get closer and closer to this playoff push. But first, we have to talk about the Liberty and the Fever, and most specifically, Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark, because this duo just continues to keep doing it for the Indiana Fever. Kelsey Mitchell scored 20 of her 28 points in just the first half. Then you have Caitlin Clark, who added 22 points and 10 assists. And I think what works so well for this duo, especially when we start seeing them play the way that they are right now, specifically between this tandem, is you have Kelsey Mitchell, who's going to be one of your main scorers. She's constantly going to be looking for a bucket, and she can get a bucket literally whenever she wants to create one. But you also have Caitlin, who is kind of at the helm of being able to be that facilitator while also being able to get her own bucket. So that tandem alone, where you have the facilitator but scorer, then you also have the scorer, it's a lot going on, and it just has really been working for them.
It has, and the Fever are really on probably the best stretch of the season right now in how they're playing, which right around this time is right about where you want to be post All-Star break, getting that good playoff positioning. But to your point, when you have a player like Caitlin Clark, who is getting a lot of these outlet passes and then pushing pace, really trying to get the ball up the court quickly and then create from there, that's what really opens up the Fever's offense in the first place. You see Aaliyah Boston be the benefactor of that. Kelsey Mitchell, another big one, who, because she's so bursty with her speed, she just always catches defenders off guard. And if you're already on your heels, that is not the position you want to be when you're trying to guard Kelsey Mitchell. And that's exactly how she thrives and scoring so quickly, because with the Fever, you have Caitlin Clark kind of controlling the offensive flow the majority of the game. But when you have players surrounding her like a Kelsey Mitchell or a Aaliyah Boston that can really score as soon as the ball touches their hands, that keeps everything in motion. And that's why the Fever has one of the best offenses in the WNBA. They scored another 100-plus point game, continuing for that WNBA record. And it's really, really clicking now, because in this game, you look at Aaliyah Boston, who had 19.7 rebounds. And when a player can score 19 points and that's like not really the one of the headline players for that game, it means that your offense is very high powered, which is exactly the case for the Fever.
Yeah, and the efficiency at which they were able to score yesterday as well. You look at Kelsey Mitchell alone, she was 11 of 16 from the field. Kelsey Mitchell does not miss a lot of baskets, and I feel like that really needs to be talked about even more, because not only is she an elite scorer, but you can have players that put up a significant amount of points, but it might have taken 30 shots to get there, but they have the ability, they have that green light to keep shooting. But with Kelsey Mitchell, especially when you have a team like you're saying, you have Aaliyah Boston, you have 5 players that were in double-digit scoring yesterday. So when you have a player that can get to that standpoint, almost get a 30 ball and do it in an efficient way while everybody else is also having a double-digit scoring sort of night, there's a lot of like unselfishness that comes with that, because she also understands that other people on this team can score, but she knows when her path is clear for her and when that thing is green, and she's able to do it very effectively. But this is also an Indiana team that shot very well from the 3-point line yesterday. And I think what stood out to me most about this game as a whole is they didn't allow that to make this game too tight for them to a degree. New York was able to have a little bit of a run, make a push because their shots weren't falling as much as they were before. But I think it's that big recovery aspect. Part of that was because of Kelsey Mitchell. She had a 3-point play, which allowed them to kind of find their groove once again. But I think that's part of like having a Caitlin Clark, having a Kelsey Mitchell. Besides just the scoring efficiency, this team can also know when to get this team back into the game. And I put a lot of that on to Kelsey Mitchell in terms of she's constantly putting herself on the line for every single game.
She is, and she's like just one of the most pure hoopers in the WNBA. You can tell she really loves the game, and there's just no stopping her. She moves like water when she's on the floor. If you try to defend her and cut her off in one point, she's going to throw a counter. If you try to do it again, she's going to do another counter. She just goes exactly where those gaps are and finds a way either to the rim, in the mid-range, or in the three-pointer to hit those shots. And she was 4 of 4 from the three-point line, because you talked about the three-point shooting for the Fever last game. And they were 16 of 25 as a group. So that's 64%, just doing it really efficiently as a whole. And I'll give a lot of credit to Aaliyah Boston as well. She was 3 of 5 in that game, and she's really taken her three-point shot to another level this season also, which makes her another really difficult guard. When you look at most of the time, the other team's best interior defender is guarding her most of the time. Those players want to stay a little closer to the rim and offer that kind of protection. But if you have to step all the way out to the three-point line to guard Aaliyah Boston now, then that's just that's another player that is taken away, helping the Fever spacing, and allows a player like Kelsey Mitchell or even Caitlin Clark, who, when I was talking to their player development staff earlier in the season, he told me that they really emphasized Caitlin Clark's ability to get downhill in the off season, which we've seen a lot more this year. So when you have those players that have now the flexibility to get to the rim because of Aaliyah Boston shooting, it just makes everything so incredibly fluid.
And I really love just how this offense is run, because like you said, everybody can be a threat on the perimeter, even when you're looking to the bench. Sophie Cunningham hit 4 threes in the game as well. So a significant push lift off the bench as well. But when you have players like that again can space the floor, but I really like the fact that they are trying to use Caitlin, because I think in college, when I initially saw Caitlin Clark, I didn't realize how big she actually was. Like, she's much taller than I had previously imagined when, like, first talking about Iowa and things like that. I was like, oh, okay, she's probably like an average guard height sort of thing. But then you realize she's 6 foot. She's actually pretty strong. So you want to be able to utilize her getting into the interior as much as possible, because a lot of her matchups aren't necessarily going to be that same height as her, be that same size as her. You want to see her get down and bully down low a little bit, but then also be hitting logo threes. Like, we love the duality of that nature. But I think, something else that Kelsey Mitchell has obviously talked about in terms of this team defensively, obviously still a Liberty team who is also a very efficient scoring team at times, 92 points. But I guess, is there anything that stood out to you differently in terms of what Indiana was better capable of doing defensively in this game compared to some lapses that I guess we have seen at times?
I think, honestly, one of their best ways to win these games is to win the possession game. So looking at how many turnovers less can they have up than their opponent. And during this game, they had 2 turnovers less. So it's a little bit of a boost right there. But certain little things like that, and how many times can you force your opponent or turn your opponent over? How many missed shots can you create so that you're just pushing pace the other way? Because that's a huge part of Indiana's offense. When the other team isn't missing shots, or if they're just cashing everything, it really slows down what the Fever can do on the other end. So just having that fluidity on both ends of the court, I think, and because they like to play so up-tempo offensively, it's starting to translate more on the defensive end now, where everyone's flying around at a much better pace and trying to have each other's backs as well. So you're seeing a lot more, players helping in the gap, a lot more players coming over weak side if there is a drive, making sure they're protecting the rim and then scrambling out of that. There's a lot more of that going on compared to earlier in the season, where it felt like there are certain times where there would just be a switch, a blow by, and then a layup. So that has gotten a lot better. And Coach Stephanie White really has started to implement some of her famous defensive schemes to make sure that this team is a lot more tighter on that end of the floor.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen a lot of teams that have maybe had their defense fuel their offense this season. I feel like this is a team that the offense can fuel their defense a little bit more, because they're like, hey, we've gotten to the point where we keep having these 100+ point performances. That's a lot of work to get there. We got to make sure that we're locking down defensively as well. But stick with us, because, again, we talked about the Minnesota Lynx yesterday, but the Aces can also be a title favorite and what they need to do to be able to win a back-to-back. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before the first pitch. Sometimes it's a hitter who's been on a hot streak, a favorable pitching matchup, or even a ballpark that tends to give up home runs. Those are always the first things I look at before making my Daily Dingers pick. So, are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. All right, how do the Aces win it again? Now, this is a team that obviously we've seen have their up and downs throughout a season, but I don't find that to be uncharacteristic, because this is also something that we saw of them last season in terms of, not really making a full push and being that Aces team I would say that we know them to be until around the All-Star break. That is when they did go undefeated. That's not necessarily what it looks like at this moment, but they're already in better positioning than they necessarily were last year when they had to sort of make a push in the way that they did. Obviously, the big part of this is always going to be keeping A'ja Wilson doing A'ja Wilson things. She is another contender once again for being the MVP, because she's putting 26.3 points up per game, almost 10 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. A'ja Wilson is going to continue being A'ja Wilson. What makes the Aces is when you have Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray, when you have the big three being the big three. I feel like it is very noticeable when one player is off during one of these games, per se, that it does have a little bit of a trickle-down effect just because of how significant each of their impacts are. I guess, in your opinion, Sophia, what can this team look like as we, get closer to the playoffs, as they continue out throughout the season of being that championship contending team once again?
It really depends so much on that big three. Because I feel like A'ja, she either has good, great, or phenomenal games. And that just is what needs to continue being the case throughout the course of the season. And when she has those great and phenomenal games, that's when the Aces usually win. And she unfortunately set the bar and standard so high for herself that when she has a 20-point and not 10 rebound game, it's almost like, you're wondering what's going on with her, but it's
right?
still a good game. And that's why I say her bar is literally at good. But she continues to be the best player in the WNBA. You look at her, you watch her play, and she is the most dominant player again. like I said. And so you add her, you have like Chelsea Gray, who I think with her, one thing that I know everyone knows her as the point guard. So you look at that facilitation, but when she is scoring herself and also looking out for her own shots, that's just another way that really elevates the way that the Aces play so that defenders aren't constantly sitting on the pass. Maybe, I don't know if anyone sags off of her when they're not on ball. You can't, but still, it makes you think a second time. And then for Jackie Young has really been elevating her facilitation this season. She's had a career high assists per game. And so when you look at her and her ability to have triple doubles this season as well, that's just another benefit that you want to make sure all these players are continuing to play like that. Same thing for the entire big three, honestly. It's like they have good, great, and phenomenal games. And if they have good games, you need enough of the supporting cast to step up. If they have great games, maybe not as much. If those three have phenomenal games all at the same time, then it's enough to keep the Aces winning. But it's just a matter of if you can bring that out and sustain it for the whole entire rest of the regular season and playoffs, which a little bit difficult, but still very doable because I feel like that's essentially what we saw last season. And looking at some of the other players that I think you would also want to help continue providing that support and stepping up to their roles, you look at Steph Talbot in the starting lineup. And that's a player that you want to make sure, she's defending, being on the right spots offensively, rebounding. Same thing. Or I even look at a player like Kirsten Bell coming off the bench, who I remember Becky Hammond said last season when Kirsten Bell was in the starting lineup that Kirsten just knows where she does all the little things like offensive rebound. She's an offensive mover and she moves off ball. And those things really do matter with the spacing when you're trying to get the ball to your big three. So having players that just know how to operate around that nucleus and really help to keep everything together is what's really going to determine if the Aces are able to succeed more in this season.
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit more just about that supporting cast, because I feel like that plays a big role, and it can be difficult for your superstars who are obviously getting a ton of minutes. And with the scheduling that some of the WNBA teams do have at times, when certain teams have less than 24 hours to recover or whatever the case may be, you can't expect them to show up every single time, even though they do. But like to what you said, it's either good, great, fantastic, amazing, whatever else you can use to categorize the type of play that they have consistently. But I think when you're looking towards the bench, obviously there were some injuries towards the beginning of this season, which made their bench play maybe a little bit light. But when you look at some, players that maybe played a big role in their push last season as well, I feel like Jewell Loyd would have to be in question of that. When you're looking at her averages this season, she's averaging 7.8 points per game, 2 rebounds, assist, and a steal. Comparing that to what we've seen throughout her career, obviously, she is Jewell Loyd, but career-wise, she's averaged around 15 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal. Obviously, maybe having to play a little bit of a different role when you're on the Aces compared to when you were a little bit more of the star of the show. But I guess, how can Jewell be one of those players when you looked at kind of maybe her being part of more of a big four at times compared to just this big three? I guess, how can you continue to hope she keeps being a spark off the bench?
I think you look at how she was on the team last year, where she was the starter at the beginning of the season, but then actually told Becky Hammond that she wanted to come off the bench to just help the Aces win more games, which eventually was a move that paid off. I think that mindset to take a step back so you can find use in other ways is what was going to help the Aces team and especially Jewell Loyd, looking at her role coming off the bench again this season, because we don't know if that same conversation was had. She very well could be in the starting lineup. She has been throughout the course of this season, but now coming off the bench this season, I mean, things like catching and shooting and knocking down open 3-pointers, moving off ball and knowing how to operate well without the ball in your hands are those little things that will definitely help and just really improve the Aces spacing as well when you're looking at interior scorers like Asia Wilson. But one thing about the Aces offense is there's a ton of off-ball movement. There's a lot of screening, staggers, those just all of that going on while someone is either dribbling or holding the ball wherever on the court that I think maybe people don't realize. I think that like the big three could just go one-on-one every single possession. Like that's really not the case. Becky creates a very motion fluid offense. So the defenders are constantly never being able to just sit and wait on a move. And with a player like Jewell Loyd, she's already so much of a weapon herself. But if she can be like extra intentional on really fulfilling that role off ball that Becky Hammon needs, that not only opens up more shots for herself, but for everyone else on the floor.
Yeah, well, don't put it past the Aces to get another championship because, like we have said, when this team wants to click, they 1,000% can, and they will find a way to win. So we will see as we get a little bit closer to the playoffs and what those pushes are going to look like. Taking a look at some of tonight's matchups, we have the Sky going up against the Valkyries, Tempo going up against the Wings, Lynx going up against the Fire. Sophia, which of these games stands out to you most tonight?
Well, of course, I'm going to have to say Lynx and Fire because I will be in Portland on the call for that game. And for what it's for the Lynx and Fire, I think you look at the way that the Lynx have been playing this season and right now, and they're still looking like the standard in that team that everyone else is trying to chase. But going into Portland, this will be the first game there. Portland is still a very, very hungry team. And for us, I think what some people maybe don't realize is our ability to maybe be knocked down a player or knocked down in a difficult situation and find a way to respond and bounce back. I'll say last game, for example, our starting point guard, Carla Late, she only played a couple minutes, but then had to exit in the first quarter due to injury. And so our developmental player, Jordan Harrison, had a career best. She came off the bench. She played 28 minutes, but scored 13 points, had 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. And we'll add with those 7 rebounds, all of this while being 5'6". So the smallest player on the floor in that win against the Seattle Storm in Portland. But having that ability to just constantly, again, I'll go back to my water analogy, to find what holes need to be filled, and you're constantly moving and adjusting and flowing like water. That's what kind of contrastly, I guess, what the Portland Fire do. It's fire and water, I guess you could say, ironically enough. But I'm really excited for this matchup against the Lynx. It's gonna be the first time Minnesota's playing in Portland this season, and it should be a good one because, like I said, the Fire are just a team that never quits. And we saw the Sparks beat the Lynx a couple of games ago. So let's see if the Fire can catch Minnesota sleeping a little bit.
Listen, this is a league where anybody can get by you any given day, and every single team, no matter how strong they are, have shown that they can drop a game. So as strong as the Lynx are, between Sophia's willpower behind the Portland Fire, that can do a lot of different things. Taking a look at another game, I think this one will be interesting between the Toronto Tempo and the Dallas Wings, because I feel like this is an opportunity for the Wings to get back on track. Tempo obviously just dealing with, to me, like being a newer group on top of the injuries that you were facing. When we talk about another team that could absolutely compete with one of the most elite backcourts in the league, when you lose a Brittany Sykes and, your dynamic was mainly surrounding around Marina Mabry and her throughout the season, and you still don't have her return just yet, it makes it difficult to keep this team afloat every single game still. However, for Dallas, we've talked about them, really dropping in the standings as of late. In what ways do you feel like that they can possibly get back against Toronto?
Well, it's going to be a little difficult. They're going to have to find a way to make it work because their team is going to be having a different lineup in this game. Just looking at the most recent injury report here as of Wednesday morning, Jessica Shepard is listed as out. AZ Fudd is questionable and Alicia Clark is questionable. Also on the other side for the Tempo, Brittany Suggs out, Maria Conde questionable, and Julie Alamon questionable. So a couple injuries on both sides, but for the Wings, Jess Shepard has been one of those major constants throughout the course of the season. And the Wings are another team that prioritizes a lot of ball movement. And Jessica Shepard is at the helm a lot of the times for that, playing the point forward position, racking up those assists, and she is a triple-double threat every time she steps on the floor. So got to find a way to figure that part out. And I think for the Wings, you look at how their last game against the Minnesota Lynx ended in a loss, and Jose Fernandez, their head coach, in the post-game presser, kind of said echoed the same sentiments he did earlier in the season, essentially saying that, there needs to be more accountability on this team. So this is going to be another one of those gut check games for the Wings. And we can see if Coach Fernandez lit another fire and that helped and benefited this team like he did earlier this season because they were able to respond then. We'll see if it happens now again.
Yeah, we can only hope. Taking a look at another quick game, we have the Chicago Sky going up against the Golden State Valkyries. This is a tough one because the Sky still without two very key scorers at the moment. Still no Skylar Diggins, out with her right knee. No Sydney Taylor, out with her left groin. I mean, that one hurts the most. I really hate seeing some of these Sky players this season just like being on such a fantastic track and then it being backpedaled essentially due to injury. However, I think when we're looking at this game, obviously Golden State, it's always going to be them defensively. This is a Chicago Sky team that does really like to be pretty efficient in the paint. If they are not hitting threes, and they have shown the ability to not hit plenty of threes this season, this can make for a little bit of a tough looking game because this is just a Valkyries team that defends everything very well. I think also Chicago having to respond to some of that defensive pressure at times. But Golden State, again, has been on a team that has been on a very significant run. What stands out to you most about this one?
Well, when you mentioned just the interior play of the Chicago Sky, I will say they're getting a bit of a break because one of the league leaders in blocks this season, Kia Stokes for the Valkyries, is listed as out for this game because she's in concussion protocol. And that's a major rim protector and interior defender that you're losing. And looking at a player like Camila Cardoso that really eats in the paint when she gets the ball down there, it could be a different story today.
Yeah, I don't know. I need Camila to like dunk or something. Just really throw everybody off and set the tone. But as always, thank you so much for watching Locked On Women's Basketball. We'll be back to recap some of the games as well as take a look at the rest of the week.